All right. I am so excited to be here today with the world's greatest living composer, Kelly Richardson. We are going to be talking about, among other things, but we're going to be mostly talking today about the Seven Tales of Poe. And Kelly, did you want to tell the audience a little bit about you and the inspiration behind this?
Let me think. I'm trying to think of I'm thinking of what Jack Benny would have said about how it's important not to come out and say you're the world's greatest living composer, even though
But
you.
I said it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. That's what he
So it's
would have
okay.
said. So that's right. I should give a little background just to tell you how I became the world's greatest living composer.
Yes, and our watchers and listeners will have a
They'll
background
want to
on
know
you.
this. They'll want to
They're
know because there's a lot of competition out there. And I feel kind of guilty being the best. But
I don't think you should. I think you should own it.
that's why I'm owning it. So
Own it.
I'm owning it, but I do have to explain why. So yeah, when I was 15 years old, I was every penny I ever made, I bought records with. And my favorite record store was called Disc Records and Tape. And they would have a sale every month. They gave away the Schwann catalog, which had everything. It listed every recording available in the world of classical music, which was very convenient because nowadays there's no way to just look up Beethoven's Seventh Symphony and see what all the recordings are because there's just too many. But back then they would give out this catalog, and then they had a sale every month. So one month it would be a sale of RCA records. Anything on RCA records was discounted. And the next month it would be Angel Records. And the next month it would be Columbia Records. And so I saved up every penny I made mowing lawns and spent all of it at this store. And anyway, one day when this was before I was 15, but when I was 15, the owner of the store said, you know more about classical music than anybody I know. Would you like to work here? And I said, seriously? And he said, yeah, you have to be 16 to work here, but we'll make an exception. So anyway, I was working there, and I worked there. It was the dream job for me. But one day they hired a new employee, and he came in one day and he said, I can't believe. He said, did you watch Johnny Carson last night? And I said, no. He said, can't believe what happened. He said, Itzhak Perlman was on, and he told Johnny Carson asked him, who do you think is the greatest violinist in the world? And he said, well, I think I am. and we were both, he was very disgusted. He said, of all the nerve. And I was quite surprised because Itzhak Perlman was an amazing violinist. I mean, absolutely amazing. But I was thinking, well, so is Isaac Stern, and so is Pinka Zuckerman and Heinrich Schering, and the list goes on. Nathan Milstein, Jascha Heifetz was still alive, very much still alive. And but then a second thought occurred to me. I thought, he just announced that on Johnny Carson, and more people watch Johnny Carson than buy these records. And I thought, I'll bet you that in 6 months from now, everyone in the world is going to think that Itzhak Perlman is the greatest violinist in the world. And by gosh, I was right. And
True.
Not to put him down at all. He is absolutely amazing. I mean, it's mind-boggling what he can do. He doesn't play a note out of tune, and he's played everything there is to play over and over. And he does it without even thinking. He just, off he goes. But anyway, many, many, many years later, because that was before YouTube, that was before the internet. Many years later, and eBay, I don't know if I was on eBay or what, but they were selling a property that was designed by, I was thinking Andrew Lloyd Webber. Was it Frank Lloyd Wright?
Yes. Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah. And I thought, this is interesting, and you were able to look at the property because it was for sale. So they showed the stairs that went down to the little kind of quasi basement entrance to the building. And I'm looking at the pictures, and I'm thinking, if this wasn't made by Frank Lloyd Wright, would I have thought it was worth a lot of money? I thought, there are buildings, in our neighborhood that seem to be, better kept up. And plus it looked really dated. I don't know if you'd call it the 60s or the 70s look, but I was thinking, that wouldn't fly in today's world as much as, maybe back then. But anyway, that was just a picture in my mind. And and I don't know much about architecture, but then we jump ahead another decade or two, and and I was online, as everybody is, when I happened upon a little anecdote, and it was talking about somebody meeting Frank Lloyd Wright, and I don't know if the guy's name was Jimmy. I'll pretend it was Jimmy. And he walked up to him and said, "Hi, my name is Jimmy. And what's your name?" And he said, what did he say? He said, "I am the world's greatest architect." And then I connected the two stories. I thought, oh my goodness. Itzhak Perlman said, "I'm the world's greatest violinist." Frank Lloyd Wright said, "I'm the world's greatest architect." So I went online that minute, and I went to Facebook and I said, "World's greatest living composer," because I thought, okay, I will take a lesson from Itzhak Perlman and Frank Lloyd Wright, and I'm going to try it, see if it works. And all you have to do is say it enough times, right? So, the good news that there are some people in Germany who are calling me the world's greatest living composer. That's how you'd get it started. You have to say it yourself first. And so I apologize for having said it first. I'm not any greater than so many others, but I said it. So there you have it. That's the story.
Well, and I know the world's greatest living composer. So there you go.
Right. And you are the world's greatest living coach. This is my coach.
Thank you for that. I'm honored and humbled. But that's funny, because that's really the world that you and I met in, was the world of personal development.
That's true. Oh, that's my little raven, by the way. Which, oh my goodness. Yeah. We were visiting the Grand Canyon and other sites, and this was for sale in the gift shop. So I bought it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, he's part of the 7 Tales for sure.
He is. I bought him while I was contemplating writing it, and is in the middle of working on it. And speaking of 7 Tales of Poe, it opens with 3 notes that I got from you. So you were the first person that I let hear any of this. My entire family sat there while I had headphones on and wrote the piece on my computer, and none of them got to hear it.
It's amazing.
But I let you hear some of it before it was finished, and you said it was missing something. It needed a hook. And so we talked about it, and it kind of made me nervous. I thought, oh dear, I mean, the piece is already, I've already got it well on its way. How do I add a hook without changing everything? And then you said, well, it could just be something as simple as nevermore.
Nevermore.
We talked about nevermore. And then before we ended the phone call, I said, why don't you just say nevermore the way you think, sing it the way you think a raven would sing it. And by gosh, you sang the exact thing that I used for the first 3 notes of the piece. So anyone that wants to listen to the piece, she said, do you want to try it again, or do you think you could remember?
Can't remember it. I can't remember how I did. Oh. Nevermore. Something.
That's about it. That's approximately it. And I thought, that's kind of what I would have pictured too. And anyway, yeah, that's kind of a long story, but that became the theme. And then I decided, so I put it throughout the whole piece. I did work it in, and I wasn't finished writing the piece at that time, but I stuck it in the places where it was already written. Then I decided, well, let's have the full orchestra play those notes, to begin. So that's the first thing you hear, and it doesn't sound like a high squeaky nevermore. It is a loud boom, boom, boom.
Nevermore.
Yeah.
And I just think it's just wonderful. You know, I think when we were talking at the very beginning of all this, we really want this to be the nutcracker of Halloween because it is that good.
It is. It is. What can I say?
It's the
As
world's
the world's
greatest
greatest living
nutcracker of
composer. What
Halloween.
can I say?
But
And as Mozart would have said, it is the greatest work yet written for viola and orchestra.
there you go. Well, and
I
it's
shouldn't say that.
interesting.
Mozart wrote the greatest work ever.
Well, what's
His
really
has a
interesting.
violinist sharing the spotlight. This one does not have a violinist sharing the spotlight. So
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, the viola. So, you know, what is it about the viola that it's not as popular as it could be? And now you're going to bring it into the light here, I think.
well, that was actually my goal. That was exactly my goal. So that was precisely my goal. So my favorite work for viola and orchestra is Bartók's Concerto for Viola and Orchestra. And bless his heart, he died. I should do a little more history research. I think he died of leukemia, but he died of something terrible as a young, well, not as an incredibly young man, but very young. And he died before he finished writing the piece. So it is my absolute favorite work for viola and orchestra. But he didn't get to finish it. He didn't finish it. He didn't orchestrate it. He didn't put his stamp on it and say, I'm done. But it's still an absolutely thrillingly wonderful piece, and I love it. And then you go beyond that. The first piece I ever heard for viola and orchestra, where I seriously sought it out and wanted to hear it, was the Berlioz Harold in Italy. And that is, well, Mozart wrote a work which is very famous, and I'm sure it's considered the greatest work for viola and orchestra, but it's a Sinfonia Concertante for violin, viola, and orchestra. So the viola is sitting there next to a violin, sharing the spotlight. And so it's not fair to call it a viola piece, even though the viola absolutely shines in that piece. I mean, no question about it, but it's still sharing the spotlight with the violinist. And so Harold in Italy is a work that Paganini had just gotten a viola from Antonio Stradivarius, and he wanted to play it. So he asked the great composer Berlioz to write something. And Berlioz wrote something quite wonderful, but it's more like a symphony that has a viola solo through the whole thing. And coincidentally, my favorite, well, first of all, I started with a recording of William Primrose. I didn't get much sleep last night. I don't get much sleep most nights because I was.
You have all this inspiration in your mind.
It's ridiculous, yeah. But William Primrose is actually, if I recall correctly, and I think I do, Bartók wrote his viola concerto for William Primrose, but Paganini wrote Harold in Italy for. Sorry, Berlioz wrote Harold in Italy for Paganini. And when Paganini got the piece, he said, this isn't really a viola concerto. And he said, I'm not going to pay for it. So he didn't pay for it. So that must have been devastating for Berlioz. But one day Paganini attended a concert where someone else played it. So, you know, I like I said, I should read my history, but this is what I know from album covers. And and Paganini was so moved by the piece that he walked up to Berlioz and handed him a lot of money. He said, here you go. I was very moved by the piece and all that. But anyway, my favorite violist in the world, I have to say it, is Paul Neubauer. And there are a lot of great violists. I love a lot of violists, but he is my absolute favorite. And he performed Harold in Italy. Well, first of all, he performed it with the New York Philharmonic at least once, maybe more than once. And his history was he was the youngest principal player ever hired by the New York Philharmonic at the time that he was hired. He was just a very young man, and they made him the principal violist of the New York Philharmonic. and he performed Harold in Italy with them, and it was magnificent. It was I just thought he put in some genius into playing that part. There's just one or two spots in there that I thought, I like it, but this is kind of corny. A little bit corny. And when he played it, it wasn't corny. He made it work. And I thought, wow, he made it work. And then he actually came to Utah and performed it with the Utah Symphony in Maurice Abravanel Hall. And I was present, of course, and something I had never picked up from the recording, but it was blatantly obvious when you saw the piece performed live. He's standing there playing the viola, and he's playing the viola, playing the viola, playing the viola, during this amazing symphonic work. And then for about the last 15 minutes of the piece, he doesn't play anymore. He's just standing there. And I thought, this is bizarre. And it kind of reminds me of that scene in Amadeus where they're conducting the ballet music. But I forget, what was it? The music is turned off and they're dancing, and the king says, "What is this?" So I was kind of thinking, what is this? The viola player is standing there as the piece ends. For 15 minutes, he doesn't play. And then the piece ends and the audience claps. And it's like, now the violist has to bow, but he hasn't played anything for 15 minutes. And I just thought, there's something wrong. Someone needs to write a work for viola and orchestra where the violist absolutely is the star. I thought someone has to write a piece where at the end of the piece, the audience gasps and gives the viola player a standing ovation, the same way that every violinist in the world gets a standing ovation. Every pianist in the world gets a standing ovation. If a cellist plays the Dvorak cello concerto, he's going to get a standing ovation. People are going to have tears in their eyes. I'm thinking that work for viola doesn't exist. And I'm going to write it.
And you did write it, and you did. And what's really interesting is the way that you wrapped it together with the 7 Tales of Poe. I mean, that is just, it's genius, because you've got the raven in there, but it's just really wonderful how what inspired you to pick that as a backdrop?
Well, that is a great question too. And, I married a violist, and when I made the decision to become a composer, my first thought, a lot of composers are inspired by, what can I say, women. And I was actually borrowing her viola at the time that I decided to become a composer. And anyway, my first thought was, I'm going to write a viola concerto someday because of
that is awesome. And Barbara is the one.
She is the one. I didn't expect her to play it, but because she's a violist, I thought someone has to do this. So that was my first thought, was to do that. So I put a lot of thought into writing a viola concerto, and the great model would be the Dvorak cello concerto. When I first heard the Dvorak cello concerto, it was Gregor Piatigorsky playing it. And I thought, isn't this nice? A cellist gets an opportunity to play a solo. When that piece ended, I was just in shock. I thought, wow, wow, wow. And I think it became my favorite piece overnight. And I thought, that was kind of the model. We need to write the Dvorak cello concerto of viola concertos. And the viola is actually a miniature cello. It's the exact same notes, an octave higher. And many times I thought, if you just took the Elgar cello concerto or the Dvorak cello concerto and had a violist play it, that would probably be great. Mm-hmm. But what I found, there are recordings of people who have done that. And I'm thinking, it doesn't work. I don't know why, but it really doesn't work, and because in the back of my mind, I was thinking, what if those concertos were written for viola in the first place and nobody knew they were cello concertos? And theoretically, I thought it might work, but seriously, I have it doesn't work. And so I just thought, what do you do? But I have written a lot. A good friend of mine, a very, very good friend of mine, is a violist. He actually studied with William Primrose, and he went to Juilliard, got a degree, and he's a professional violist. And in fact, he's played for some Hollywood films, in the viola section, some big ones. And he would ask me to do a lot of transcriptions for him. He would do the Mendelssohn trios and a lot of pieces, the Brahms horn trio. Some of these works, they've taken the cello part and written them for viola, but some of them they haven't. So he would hire me to do that. And one day they did a concert, a trio. It was called the Paradigm Trio. And they did a concert of trios, I believe it was. It was trios. At the Archduke Trio, various trios. And I had changed the viola part, the cello parts into viola parts so that they could do that. Piano, violin, and viola instead of cello. And this, I just looked it up today. It was on November 9th, 2003. So this is the exact date that the idea popped into my head.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. And but anyway, I had done all that work. It was a lot of work. And they performed it. And the critic for the biggest newspaper in the state, he was there, and he put a headline in the newspaper: "Viola made to shine in concert." And then in the article, I was named. Kelly Richardson did all this work so that the viola could shine. And I didn't realize, 20 years later, that was the headline. But it was during that concert. I was done working, and I didn't have to attend the concert, but you don't do all that work and not attend the concert. So I attended the concert. And while I was sitting there, just listening, all this history of the viola, I've played the viola. Coincidentally, I've never ever in my life played the viola in public, and that's a great story that we should probably cover. But I knew how to play the viola. I had a viola teacher who also studied with William Primrose, and he wrote 2 books with William Primrose, and he taught me to play the viola. And it's the most amazing story, seriously, because I would ask people, I know how to play the viola. Can I play the viola in your orchestra? And they would say, no. We need you on violin. And I would say, oh, come on, I want to play the viola. I know how. They would say, no, we need you on violin. So we would get in little chamber groups, quartets and trios. And I'd say, could I play viola? And they'd say, no, we don't, we have a violist. We need you on violin. So as much as I bet it was as if it was intended to happen this way.
Yeah.
I ever, even in a practice room, even in a rehearsal, ever played the viola in my life once, except during these viola lessons with this amazing, great violist. And I kind of jumped ahead, because on the recording that we have of 7 Tales of Poe, as you know, this is jumping into the story too much. It's me playing the viola, because the world premiere has not happened. But that recording of me playing the viola is the first time I've ever played the viola in public, ever.
Isn't that interesting? But you did it.
I did it. And I did it in the basement of this house. This is the same house where I had all those viola lessons. So I still haven't played the viola outside of this house, but I played it for that recording. So anyway, I got on a tangent there. So where was I?
Well, and you mentioned Paul Neubauer.
That's
Paul
right.
Neubauer has heard this piece, and he's up to play it, isn't he?
That is correct. So yeah, I need to finish the story. I finally remembered, how I get on tangents. So I was sitting there hearing my transcriptions, and I remembered a lot of people would say, oh, I love the sound of the viola. It's so dark. And they all would say that, oh, I love it. It's so dark. And then I thought, dark. And I thought, Edgar Allan Poe is dark. What if you used Edgar Allan Poe as the inspiration for a work for viola and orchestra? What if someone wrote a piece called 7 Tales of Edgar Allan Poe for viola and orchestra. I thought that would work. So, all this struggle to like, how would I write a viola concerto? I just couldn't get it to work. It's like, and all these cello concertos played on the viola, they just don't work. And you think they should work. And I thought, but if you wrote a work for viola and orchestra where viola was the star in the first place, before you even wrote the work, it was intended to be for viola, because I knew what the viola sounded like. So that was the premise. And I thought that would work.
And you actually took this international already, because you wrote part of it over in the restaurant.
In Leipzig, yes.
Yes.
So yes, I guess, yeah, I'll tell you the next step that happened was, well, actually, we were walking across, I think my ride home from this concert that I'd written all this music for was the viola player. I think he was going to give me a ride home, because either that or I had the car in the same parking lot, one or the other. But I remember walking across the street from the concert to go to the parking lot. And I just told him the thought that occurred in my head. I said, it occurred to me that someone should write a piece, called Seven Tales of Edgar Allan Poe for viola and orchestra. And he goes, well, I think you should do it. And for some reason, it didn't occur to me that I should do it. I just thought someone should do this. And I thought, well, of course I should do it. I'm a composer. How could I have not thought of that first thing? So then the next thing I did, I thought, well, okay, I just came up with the title, and I thought, well, which seven tales should I do? I had not read Seven Tales of Edgar Allan Poe. I'd read The Telltale Heart, and I thought, well, The Telltale Heart has to be one of them. And then I thought, I'm going to have to I don't want to be esoteric about this. It's got to be the seven tales that everybody wants to hear. So I thought, I'm going to do some research, and, it's going to be it's got to be The Telltale Heart, The Pit and the Pendulum. And I thought, I'm going to research this and find out. So I spent 10 solid years. It started out with the Vincent Price box set of
oh my gosh, I didn't know this. I don't think I remember hearing this.
That's where I started. And yeah, coincident. I hate to go on another tangent, but many years ago, I wrote a piece called The Battle of Shiloh, and some film producers heard the piece, and through the grapevine, they sent a message to me that they wanted to hire me to be the composer. They were going to do 2 films starring Vincent Price. You've never heard this, I'll bet.
No, I haven't heard this. I mean, Vincent Price, my goodness.
I've always loved Vincent Price.
Yes.
But he was still alive, and he was, I suppose, signed up to do 2 films with, I mean, this would have been some independent filmmakers, and I don't even know who they were. I know who it was that told me, but they liked my music, and they said, we like him. We will have him be the composer. And so I thought, wow, my first 2 films are going to be Vincent Price, and I couldn't have been more thrilled. And then he died, and that was the end. I never heard I mean, obviously, but he died. So I thought, that's not going to happen. But that was in the back of my head. So when I'm looking at these things, I'm thinking, Vincent Price is the man I was going to write film scores for. So I mean, my heart, I love Vincent Price even more because of that. But he has a box set of CDs of him doing a lot of Edgar Allan Poe tales. And some of them are abridged, but that's where I started. And then I found every CD there is of every story of Edgar Allan Poe. And I listened to them over and over and over and over and over in the car. And I remember, Naxos came out with a CD set of Edgar Allan Poe's tales, but they hadn't done it yet when that happened. So I literally watched as each CD release of any tale of Edgar Allan Poe came out.
That is awesome.
And I heard them so many times. Every lunch break, I would listen to them constantly while I'm eating a burger. And I got to the point where I could, I could hit pause and tell you the rest of the tale. And I listened to everything he did, um, every story, because I wanted to just envelop myself in everything and then choose the best tales. So musically, what's happening in the music is not just the seven tales I chose, but it's everything Edgar Allan Poe ever wrote. Plus, I spent a little bit of time on his biography.
Mhm.
And the music, what it's telling is, well, to get into the music now, the actual, there's a drum beat in the music, the timpani. And as you know, we had a short discussion. An incredibly important person in my life, one of my mentors that introduced me to classical music and orchestra music and everything else, was a timpanist. And he was the timpanist of the Utah Symphony. He was also a wonderful conductor, and he started youth orchestras. He was just a great man. And he was my inspiration for the timpani. I mean, I can't write a note for timpani without thinking of him. And he, of course, passed away, and I got to conduct, and I arranged a piece and conducted it for his funeral. And but he is the inspiration for anything I ever write for timpani, obviously. But in the work Seven Tales of Edgar Allan Poe, the timpanist represents the heartbeat of Edgar Allan Poe himself. So Edgar Allan Poe is a real life character in this piece. He's not fictional. I thought, all these stories were written by a real person, and that real person is represented by the timpani. So you hear, in fact, the first notes that you hear of the viola playing is a viola solo with a timpani. So there's only two instruments playing. It's a viola and a timpani. And so the viola is, of course, the soul of the whole piece. But the timpanist literally represents the soul of Edgar Allan Poe. And when it starts with Nevermore, which you composed, I just wrote it down as you sing it. And then that motif, Nevermore, plays over and over and over throughout the whole work. And coincidentally, when I first heard it, I thought, people are going to think I ripped off Bernard Herrmann, because he goes, dum, boom, boom. Psycho, that is a big theme in Psycho. And coincidentally, John Williams, bless his heart, in Star Wars, there's a scene in the opening of Star Wars where they're opening some kind of trapdoor or something, on that ship. And he uses that as a quote. I'm sure there's no question in my mind. He's giving a little hats off to Bernard Herrmann. But anyway, I was not intentionally ripping off Bernard Herrmann, but our Nevermore theme, which you sang, sounds a lot like that theme, but it's not exactly. But anyway, the last thing the viola plays is Nevermore. He plays the theme that you did, but when he's all done, the last three notes are given to Edgar Allan Poe. The timpanist goes boom, 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 and that means Nevermore. So Edgar Allan Poe, not the violist, gets the last word. And I have to dedicate that last word to my mentor, who was
absolutely
the timpanist. He's a timpanist on at least 100 recordings that the Utah Symphony did. For example, it's called The Complete Works of Tchaikovsky, the Utah Symphony. It's not the complete works, but it's most of them, or a lot of them. And he's the timpanist on all of those. So if you want to hear him, that's the timpanist that was the inspiration for the drum beat.
That's awesome. It's so much fun to hear sort of the music behind the music, the story behind the music.
And then the best part. Okay, this is the best part. So I wrote I wrote the piece, the premiere. Oh, by the way, we should announce to the world today is the day that Edgar Allan Poe died tragically. It is October 7th. We didn't announce that, did we?
Oh my goodness. I guess that's absolutely true.
Yeah, I looked it up a couple of times just to make sure. And we didn't plan that, but there you go. This is the anniversary. This is also the anniversary of the day that I wrote the first note of the piece. So
that is awesome.
Yeah. so along with the story of listening to so I really wanted to choose the 7 top tales. It had to have the Telltale Heart. I did nothing but music. When I was 4 years old, I begged my mom to teach me to play the piano. She said, "No, you have to wait till you're 5." I said, and she insisted. So what I did is I just decided, I'm 4 years old. I decided to teach myself to play the piano, and she saw that was a disaster. So she said, "Okay, I'll teach you." So she taught me. And when I was 5 years old, I literally accompanied the singing in kindergarten. They had a piano in every classroom. And to my knowledge, the kindergarten teacher didn't play the piano, but they would sing songs, and I played the piano well enough that I could accompany the singing. So, I mean, I could absolutely read music when I was in kindergarten. But what did that have to do with this?
Well, it's interesting because it's always fun to hear, a little bit about your background and how you came to this profession. And your mother was quite the prolific teacher, wasn't she?
That's right. She was. I'm glad you remembered that. She taught up to 100 students every week. I mean, it was always 80 to 100. She taught a lot of students. And that was one of the reasons. And all of my siblings, I was the youngest one, so I'm spoiled rotten. It's true. In all the fairy tales, isn't it the youngest one that, what can I say? But yeah, I
You were
adore my
lucky.
older siblings. I have to blame them too for teaching me about classical music. One of my older brothers was the first person to bring a classical music album into the house, and that Beethoven's Ninth Symphony was one of those pieces performed by the London Symphony. And boy, that totally that changed my life. You can't listen to that and not become a different person. And that was thrilling to me. But the reason what I did when I was like 4 and 5 years old, I practiced the piano because I just loved it. I would practice the piano for like 15 hours a day, seriously. We we had a piano bench with a big cushion on it, and I would practice and then fall asleep on that bench. But what this is leading to, we get to junior high school, and part of being in school, you have to read books. And I would look at a book and think, "Oh my goodness, I just couldn't fathom reading a book." And then they introduced the short story, and because you had to read a lot. And when they introduced the short story, it was the Telltale Heart, and I read it, and they gave us the assignment. We had to go read this short story. And when I read it, I was so thrilled. I thought, that was fun. I could read that in one sitting. I didn't have to like put a bookmark in it. So it was the most exciting thing that ever happened in an English class for me. The short story was a revelation to me. I don't have to read a book because I spent all my time practicing the piano and later the violin and other things. So anyway, that's the explanation for how I fell in love with Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that was your first short story.
Yeah.
No?
Oh, it had to be one of them. But so anyway, I narrowed it down to 7 tales. There were kind of 8 tales that I did lots of internet research, but 2 of the tales that kind of fought each other for popularity were the Pit and the not the Pit and the Pendulum, the Cask of the Amontillado, and the Black Cat. And I thought, those 2 stories have one thing in common. That is, murdering someone and burying them inside of a wall. And I thought they both have kind of the same plot. So I'm going to just choose one of those, even though they're both very, very popular stories. I can't have them both in there because they both have kind of the same ending, someone buried behind a wall. I thought that's too similar. So I just picked one of them. But with music, you can, in your mind, so in my mind, both stories are there, but officially only one of them is there. But I was going to Germany because a wonderful orchestra had requested to perform my Battle of Shiloh. And bless their hearts, they invited me to come and hear them play it. And I couldn't have been more thrilled. And meanwhile, I had purchased every recording there was of Edgar Allan Poe stories on any kind of tape. One of the stories I picked that was not one of the most popular was A Descent into the Maelstrom. I had to choose it because it had more. Most of Edgar Allan Poe's stories are slow and suspenseful, but that story had nature in it. It had water, it had whirlwinds. I thought, I need something that isn't so much quietness. So I had to do that just because of the musical quality that was in there. But I was all over the internet, all over Amazon, buying every book. I have lots of Edgar Allan Poe books and recordings. And I was going to Germany, and one of the little paperback books on Amazon was Edgar Allan Poe's 8 Greatest Tales. And I thought, I'll order that. So I ordered it. It came in the mail, and I threw it into my online luggage. And I thought, I'm gonna pull that out during my flight and just see how I did. If these are the 8 greatest tales, I wonder if I picked 7 of them or not. So I'm in the middle of this long flight to Germany, and I pull out this book, and the first tale in the book was Metzengerstein. And I thought, I've never heard of that. There were 7 tales. The Black Cat was one of them, of course, and The Pit and the Pendulum. And I had picked most of the tales. I wasn't surprised that A Descent in the Maelstrom wasn't in there. But like I said, I had 2 to choose from where they end by bricking someone into a wall. So I thought, by choosing just one of those, it gives me an excuse. Kind of musically, I'm involving both of them. But the first story in there was Metzengerstein. And I thought, I have never heard of that in my life.
I don't think I've read that.
And I read it on the airplane. I thought, wow, because it had all the elements of great music. Speaking of Berlioz, who wrote Harold in Italy, he also wrote The Damnation of Faust. And my favorite scene in there is this galloping horse. It's a galloping horse that's taking Faust or somebody down to hell. And there's this great galloping thing in it. And there's a chorus that just screams, while he's going down there. And it's always been one of my favorite Halloween moments in all of music. But it was written by the same guy that wrote the piece for viola and orchestra, the one where the violist stands there for the last 15 minutes and doesn't play anything.
Kind of just standing there. Yeah.
But this story had that in it. It had a galloping horse. It had flames. It had everything. And I'm flying to Germany, like I said. And the thing that amazed me about this tale, it said it had a subtitle. Oh, shoot. The subtitle was kind of weird. Should have done some research here. It was like an imitation of the Gothic horror story, but it was more specific than that. But it was basically what the subtitle meant was it's an imitation. So Edgar Allan Poe was writing a story, and it was an imitation of, to put it into a quirky translation, it's an imitation of the old German Gothic short horror story. And what I found out, which was so amazing to me, because Edgar Allan Poe is famous for his short stories, he got the inspiration. His entire concept of the short story was inspired by this German Gothic tale. And so he was imitating the German Gothic tale, and that became his niche. But he got it from Germany. Here I am flying to Germany, and that's where he got the idea to write short stories, short horror stories in the first place. And who would have known? And Metzengerstein, I think he kind of made out that word. It was supposed to sound German, but I had no idea. But when I read it, I thought, I don't care if no one's heard of this. This is the most musical tale I have ever read. This has to be set to music.
Yeah, and that's number 2 on the, number 2 in the piece.
That's right. But yeah, it was the first story he ever published. So I thought, this is amazing. So I'm starting out with the first story he ever published. And then I get to Germany, And another amazing thing, while I was in Germany, I got to go to an art museum where I saw some Rembrandts for the first time, some real Rembrandts. And I was able to walk up to some Rembrandts and look at them. One of them actually had a horse in it.
Oh,
And I literally looked at the horse in this Rembrandt, the actual painting that he had done. I mean, I could have reached out and touched it, which would have been a
it's just
terrible thing to
amazing.
do. Yeah. But anyway, I had my little manuscript book with me, and some music popped into my head, and I had already read this Metzengerstein story. So I actually wrote down some notes into my little pad while looking at a Rembrandt picture of a horse.
That's
And
awesome.
in Metzengerstein, there is a painting of a horse, which is part of the story. And anyway, while I'm in Germany, the manager of the orchestra lived in Leipzig, and he wanted to take me and the manager of our orchestra in Utah. Yeah, we went to Germany together, along with this viola player that I wrote the piece for. We all went to Germany together. He conducted their orchestra in Germany. But anyway, the manager of the orchestra lived in Leipzig. He wanted to take it. He was very proud of his hometown of Leipzig. And so he took us on a tour. We got to see the St. Thomas Church where Bach lived and where he
Wow.
he played the organ. We got to see and hear the organ he played on. I got to see the organ bench that Bach sat on. I think I reached out and touched it. So this finger right here touched
It's
the
a
organ
rarefied,
bench
yeah.
that Bach sat on. And then we went to Mendelssohn's house, and the highlight was we went to this restaurant. And speaking of the damnation of Faust and the bumpity horse sound, this restaurant is where Goethe went. It was his favorite restaurant. And it was while he was in that restaurant eating that he came up with the idea to write Faust. And that's what was explained to me. And I said, "You've got to be kidding." And I had my little notebook with me, and I had, I'd been working for 10 years on deciding, what to write. I said, "Oh, this is too good." And the coincidence, I was going to say it was 2019. It wasn't. It was 5 years before that. It was 2014, October 7th. And I said, "Wow, we are in Leipzig. We are in the restaurant where Faust was thought up." Not only that, this restaurant is named in Faust. He has the devil and Faust go to this restaurant. Story. And I said, "This is too good. I am here
That
in
is
this
awesome.
restaurant on the day that Edgar Allan Poe died mysteriously." And I said, "I have to start writing 7 Tales of Edgar Allan Poe right here." And he said, "Well, this is very exciting." And there's a statue in front of this restaurant. In fact, it's called Auerbach's Keller, if you want to know, which means Auerbach's cellar. And that's the name of the restaurant. But there's a statue in front of it. It's a famous statue, and it's like the Blarney Stone, where everyone has to kiss the Blarney Stone. If you're in Leipzig, you're supposed to touch the foot of the statue of Faust in front of this restaurant. And so I said, "I'm not going to touch the foot. I'm going to put my music book on there and start writing 7 Tales of Poe on the foot of this restaurant." And they said, "That's a great idea."
That is awesome.
I did. So I did. I put it, and they took pictures and everything. And that was officially the first notes written down of 7 Tales of Edgar Allan Poe.
And didn't you go back and finish it there too?
That is the best part of the story.
Oh, so I jumped ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you didn't jump ahead. That was, that was a good, we should say it now while people can remember. So yeah, because the other coincidence. Oh, and I was so incredibly honored. It was amazing. This orchestra that played this piece of mine, they were in this city. It was a city, and I had to, Google it, and I looked it up, and I thought, I've never heard of this city, and I didn't know there was an orchestra in this city when I Googled it. But we were going to that city because of a cultural exchange thing, And so that's why I Googled it. This was before the orchestra wanted to do my piece. When we got there, I found out that this little city had an orchestra that was it was called the I don't want to mess up the name. It has a quirky name. It was the I think of it as the Elblond Philharmonic, but it's got another little bit to it, like it started out being the new and the something, so I don't want to mess it up. It's like in London, there's the Philharmonia Orchestra, there's the New Philharmonia Orchestra, there's the London Philharmonic, the London Symphony, and but anyway, this orchestra goes through Saxony and performs all over there, but their home was in this city. I thought, oh, how nice. But when I Googled it, the most interesting thing about the city, they didn't mention the orchestras. I didn't even know they were there. But the most interesting thing is that it had a monastery that was almost 900 years old. I thought, wow,
Oh
that's
my goodness.
old. I thought that's way older than America. So I thought, if you're going to go to Germany and you can't go to, I always wanted to go to Bonn, Germany, which is where Beethoven was born. That's my dream, is to go there. And I still haven't been there. I've been to Germany 3 times, but I haven't been to Beethoven's.
You're going to have to get there.
I have to go back to Germany. But anyway, I thought, well, one nice thing about this city is there's this monastery that's almost 900 years old. I'll get to see that. That's going to be amazing. And of course, I did get to see that. We spent quite a bit of time in there. But the incredible honor of my life was when the orchestra contacted me after they performed the Battle of Shiloh in 2014. They actually contacted me. They said the city is going to be 900 years old now, and the city is the same age as that monastery. We're going to celebrate the 900th birthday of the city, and the orchestra wants to play your piece. And I said, seriously?
That is awesome.
I thought, wow, this is the greatest honor of my life. So they flew me back. They said I could conduct it if I wanted to, and they have a great conductor there. I mean, a really great conductor. I said, no, I want him to conduct it. So he conducted it, and I got to play in the orchestra. They said, well, you can play in the orchestra. So I did. And but anyway, that's why I went back. So it was 5 years later, but it was, I think, on October 29th. And I said, you've got to be kidding, because Halloween is October 31st. So I contacted all my friends and I said, hey, we have to do this. I want to finish writing 7 Tales of Edgar Allan Poe in that restaurant, inside the restaurant, on Halloween. Is that okay? Could you make an appointment, make a reservation? And so he said, yes. So he made a reservation. Some incredibly wonderful, dear friends of mine made the reservation. And so I finished writing the piece in that restaurant. And so anyway, long story short, so it was started in Leipzig, and then it was finished inside the restaurant on Halloween.
That to me is just, it's really, really fitting. And it's just such a great story. And the story, about the Battle of Shiloh, I mean, that piece has shown up in many places.
Yes, it has.
It's been played many places.
In St. Petersburg, Russia, by the St. Petersburg Symphony Orchestra. It's been played in Moscow by the Moscow State Philharmonic Orchestra, and in Tchaikovsky Hall in Moscow, no less. And in St. Petersburg, it was in the concert hall named after Dmitri Shostakovich, and it's been performed in Carnegie Hall. So in my mind, those are some
amazing,
great halls.
Kelly. And you have really worked with a few of the greats too. Besides, I know you had something with Earl Hagen, which,
that's right.
I love that story. Why don't you tell that story?
Okay. My favorite Earl Hagen story. He wrote,
Andy,
my dad was a great whistler, But Earl Hagen actually, he not only wrote that, he whistles it. So if you've seen the Andy Griffith Show, that's Earl Hagen whistling that.
Oh, he actually whistled that? I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Well, I was in his class. It was on Sunset Boulevard at the BMI office headquarters. And he was a thrillingly wonderful. I love Earl Hagen. I absolutely love him. He was so humble, but I mean, he's amazing. He wrote a book called, I don't know if I have the exact title. I do have the book, and good luck finding it today. You'd probably have to pay $500 for it. But I think it's the autobiography of a world famous composer that nobody's ever heard of. And that's what he called his biography, but his autobiography rather. But anyway, this is a great story. I was in his class, and he told us on the first day, he said, now you have to come to every class. You miss one of the classes and you're out. And so I thought, okay, well, that's not a problem. There's no way I'm going to miss any of these classes. So, but one of the people in the classes happened to be an orchestrator for one of the great Hollywood composers. And he did miss one class, and it was because he was at Universal Studios where they were recording a major motion picture that he had orchestrated. Mm-hmm. And I witnessed him coming to class, and Earl Hagen said, where were you last week? And he said, well, I was, doing this Hollywood film, and he said, I told you that if you miss one of my classes, you can't come. And he goes, but he says, out. And he threw him out. I just thought, whoa. Oh. So there's no way I'm going to miss a class. But meanwhile, my wife was just about to have a baby. In fact, one of our favorite quotes is that we didn't have a crib, for the baby. And we were joking with each other. It's like, what are we going to say to her when she's born? If we don't have a crib, it's like, this is life now, go at it. So we went out and bought a crib last minute. And so anyway, I wake up, it's the morning of one of these classes. They were once a week. And my lovely wife, Barbara, she says, I'll drive you to class. We're not having the baby today, that's certain. I said, okay. So she drove me to the class. I usually take the car, but she drove me, dropped me off. So we go to the class. We have these nice lunch breaks. I go out for my lunch break. I come in from the lunch break, and there's all this fuss. And Earl Hagen walks up to me and he says, what are you doing here? Your wife is having a baby. No. And I go, wow. So Earl Hagen announced that my wife was having a baby.
Oh, that's funny.
So I thought, well, I guess I'm excused, because I thought, what would have happened if I'd come and said, hey, I missed class because my wife was having a baby, but he gave me permission. But meanwhile, I didn't have a car. So this is a great story, because my absolute best friend in the world when I was living there was David Neubauer, and he's the brother of Paul Neubauer. And I just thought, what am I going to do? So I called him on the phone. I said, hey, Barbara is having a baby. I'm sitting here on Sunset Boulevard. Can you rescue me? And he said, I'll be right there. So he drove me to the hospital. And this is a great story. Speaking of Itzhak Perlman, this is going to tie it all together. My first child, was born across the parking lot from the Johnny Carson show.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's the St. Joseph's Medical Center. It is right. I mean, the parking lot on the other side of the parking lot is NBC. So that's where she was born. And he drives me there like an ambulance. We get in there and he goes in there. Of course, he's not allowed in there. And I'm about to go into the room. They say, no, you have to wear a mask and you have to wear this little blue thing. So I'm going, okay, hurry. And while they're putting that on, I hear this cry. What? They go, oh, I guess I'm kind of okay that I missed it, because, it's. But
good.
Yeah, David Neubauer's out there, and he says, you have to name that child. Her middle name has to be David Neubauer. So her name is Julia David Neubauer Richardson.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. it's unofficial, but she, bless her heart, she didn't know that it was unofficial. So her birth certificate says Julia Richardson, but she seriously thought her name was Julia David Newbear Richardson. And we finally had to correct her one day when she was telling someone officially, and they were going, "That's her name." I said, "Oh, not really." She goes, "That's not my name." I go, so anyway, that's the Earl Hagen story.
That is really, that's great. And then you also have a John Williams story, don't you?
Let me think. Yes, I do.
Well, what do you know?
I have a great John Williams story. Yeah, okay. Okay, this is my favorite John Williams story. I have never met John Williams. He is the reason I'm a composer. So, yeah, I mean, the real reason I'm a composer would be Brahms, Johannes Brahms, and Beethoven. But yeah, if you were to write the Brahms violin concerto today, they would say, "Oh, that's out of style," and because modern music is everything. I mean, there's all kinds of things in modern music, but you cannot.
Yes, yes. We'll just leave that at.
Yeah, we'll leave it at
Is it
that.
really music?
Yeah, there actually is no shortage of viola concertos. To be honest, there are probably over 1,000 viola concertos. It's not like you can't find a viola concerto, but none of them are written in the style of the Dvorak cello concerto or the Brahms violin concerto. And my goal was to write something that would, the violas, they don't have a Tchaikovsky piano concerto #1 for viola. They don't have it. And nobody can write one because you can't write in that style anymore, allegedly. But what John Williams did with Star Wars is he put classical music into films. So I became a film composer because I thought, well, now I can write in the style of music I want to write in because John Williams has paved the way. So he is literally the reason we have Seven Tales of Edgar Allan Poe. So I love John Williams, but my first love is classical music. Film music would have to be my second love, but I am a film composer. And it's because it gives me an excuse to write like Brahms and all the great composers. And we have to thank John Williams for that. So now the John Williams story. So when we moved several times, I have a record collection that I don't have anymore. I finally sold them all. I had LP records that would fill a basement, literally. And one day we sold them all. But before we did, I had records and CDs. And it took a U-Haul trailer to hold them all. And we moved over and over, and it was torture. It was absolute torture. But we were living in Los Angeles, and I kept saying, every day people are moving in Los Angeles because, people come and go. And so every day you see moving vans, and there was a moving van that said starving students moving. And I said to Barbara, oh, we were living in Los Angeles, first of all. The smog there is terrible. And what I found, it didn't matter where you went in Los Angeles. It took an hour to drive there. It doesn't matter where you go. It takes an hour to get there. And one day it occurred to me, since we have to drive an hour to get any place anyway, why don't we live in a place that has nice air? Why do we have to live in the smog? So we decided we're going to move. So we chose to move to Westlake Village, which is a beautiful, used to be a beautiful place. It burned down, which is terrible. Goodness. It did. It burned down. I don't know what it's like today because we don't live there anymore, but it was nice. And, but anyway, when we moved, I said, why don't we just call starving students for the first time in our lives? Why don't we do it the way other people do it? Let movers move us. So we called the starving students. We said, we're going to move. Would you do it? And they said, yes, we will. They said, first we have to see your apartment because we have to, know how many boxes to put it in and everything. I said, okay, that's good. So they set an appointment and they said, we're really good at this, estimating. So we set an appointment and the doorbell rings and we let the guy in. He walks into our apartment. He takes one look and he goes, you're a composer, aren't you? And I said, how did you know that? And they said, well, the last person we moved, whose house looked exactly like this, he was a composer. And so they described him, and they said, and it was really neat too, because he had 4 Academy Awards on his mantle, and he showed them to us and let us hold them. And he was really nice. And at the time, this was back in the 80s. At that time, that's all he had to say. I knew who it was. This one composer who had 4 Academy Awards. And I said, I said, I know who that is. That was John Williams. And they said,
They had no clue.
they didn't know who he was, but they
That's
did know
right.
that he was a very nice man. He had 4 Academy Awards, and he let them hold them. And I said, well, one of those Academy Awards was for Star Wars. And they said, he wrote Star Wars? I said, yes. And he wrote E.T. and he wrote Jaws. And they were just blown away. They were just thrilled. And, you know, being a film composer, I had accumulated, you know, before E.T. was released on video, they were never going to release it on video. So when they finally did, I bought 3 copies. It's like they finally released it because they said they never would. So I didn't need 3 copies anymore. I had 2 copies still in the shrink wrap. And I said, here, you can have a copy of E.T. as a souvenir since you moved John Williams. So that's my John Williams story, is that the people that moved John Williams also moved us.
That's awesome. And there is one.
John Williams. We've never met. I wish we could, but he's a wonderful man. That he's
talented for sure.
What can I say?
But he's not the world's greatest.
Oh, well.
Well, we could say that he's one of.
Let me just, I bow to John Williams. Yeah, let's stick with it. We'll stick with the trademark. World's greatest living composer. We got the trademark. So yeah.
Exactly. Well, and there is one more story before we close today. And that is the story of the chords.
The chords.
How you wrote that is awesome. The way you did that and how that could help people who really want to be trained in music.
Oh, well, that's deep. That's very deep because I'm still working on it. But yeah, that's
well, we don't have to share it today. We can do it on another call.
It's good. It's good.
Okay.
So I wanted to put into in a nutshell, I wanted to put into my brain, because everyone knows, well, not everyone, but you know, all the great jazz composers, they know all the modes and all that stuff. I am not a great jazz composer. I wish I were, but John Williams is, and that's one of the reasons that he is so amazing. But he knows everything. But I thought, I want to know all the scales. I want to know every scale there is. And so I did a lot of research, and there are 12 possible notes, you know. If you start on C, you know, C sharp and all that stuff, you go back to the next C, you're going to have 12 notes before you start starting with C again. And so one of the possible scales or intervals is just to have one note by itself. And then you can have, and those are the 2 notes that create the theme to Jaws, you know, that's a minor second. And then there's a major second, and then you can have 2, you know, those 2 notes at a time. There's a certain combination of those. There's a certain combination of 3 notes. And our Nevermore theme is 3 notes. That's one of the combination of 3 notes. And there's a nice story about that we won't get into, but I mean, there's a lot of great stories to this 7 Tales of Poe. But anyway, if you add them all up, all the possible numbers of combinations of notes, and that's not to say anything about piling them, you know, there are different, once you get those 3 notes, you can have, you know, 3 notes, you can put this one on top or the bottom or whatever. But the point is, it's these 3 notes, however you use them, there are only so many combinations of notes possible. And there are exactly 2,048 of these. And I thought, you know, I'm thinking of Tiger Woods. I don't know much about golf or Tiger Woods, but my understanding is that he would practice hitting golf balls out of a sand trap. And it's like, he practiced that a lot. and other golfers didn't. So that was one of the things. And I thought, what I want to do is know all 2048 scales, the way a jazz musician knows maybe 48 or 50 scales. It's like, I want to know them all. And just because I'm thinking that's gotta help, right? What makes jazz musicians so great is they know all the modes and all the things. And I'm thinking there are more modes, really. In a way, there are 2048 modes. I mean, that's stretching it because some of those are not scales, some of them are just intervals. But that's, in a nutshell, that's the whole point. So I created a system, and it includes all the memory systems and everything, of being able to, and another great story. I had an orchestration teacher who was considered the greatest orchestration teacher in the world. He taught a lot of the great composers orchestration. And he had a story that he told every week. He was brilliant, but a little bit senile in that he would tell the same story every week, not realizing that he had already told us the story the last week. So I heard the same story eight times in a row. But he said, when I go to the dentist, if the dentist looks into my mouth and then he ponders and then he looks on his shelf and pulls down a book and looks something up, it makes me nervous. He said, I think an orchestrator should not have to look something up in a book. And I was thinking, that's how I want
That's really
brain.
interesting.
I want my brain to have every possible combination of notes in it, so I don't have to look it up in a book. So that was the concept behind this. So anyway, in a nutshell, that's what that was.
Yeah, it's a very interesting way of doing it. It's when you think about just kind of thinking outside the box and saying, there is a way I can do this, and I'm going to figure out the way to do it. I think it's really fascinating how you did that.
Yeah. So my concept, the major triad, everybody knows that. It's like the sand trap. You want to be as good at hitting a golf ball out of the sand trap as you are doing a little putt. So I was thinking, I want to know every one of those 2048 scales the way an average composer knows what a major triad is. So, I mean, a lot of those scales you just wouldn't use, but would it hurt to have them all there? So that's the concept. I thought, that would help me to become the world's greatest living composer. That was the concept behind that. So whether I am or not, that's my goal. So there you
go. Well, and it's just interesting how these trends happen. Like there was an interview that I heard a few years ago, and they were talking about Daryl Hall and John Oates, and one of their original songs where they came up with something called it actually came into something called the millennial whoop or something like that. It's just a it's like three notes that are in every pop song.
Oh yeah, I believe
they did that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so but this is a lot more complex, obviously, and a lot more to remember. But it's just it's interesting to hear a seasoned musician talk about that. And and you had mentioned great violinists, and I have to say the gentleman's name flew out of my mind. Of course, Kelly Richardson is one.
No.
Mark Pescanoff.
Yes.
Another one. Fantastic.
I'm having trouble remembering his first name too, but he is fantastic.
Yeah, he was on an American Express commercial, and he got stuck in the train. I don't know if you remember.
I didn't know that. He had his
violin. I think he was flying out of the thing and he got stuck.
That's fantastic.
And the caption was American Express, don't leave home without it.
Yeah.
But so what everyone needs to do that has watched this, they need to go to the link below and listen to the 7 Tales, and then make sure that you put your witch's hat on. What's that?
I have to tell you my vision of
yeah.
So when I wrote the Battle of Shiloh, which was played by in all these great places. I wanted to write a piece that would show in one short piece that I would be capable of writing film music. And as you know, it did inspire some filmmakers, and I don't know their names because, you know, it was through a middleman, that were going to make some films with Vincent Price. And they said, yeah, we'll use him. But so it was successful. But when I wrote the piece, I thought, I want to write a piece. And my goal is to write a piece that would cause a standing ovation. I've been in a lot of standing ovations. I thought that's my goal is, you know, what would I have to do in a piece that would create a standing ovation? So when I wrote Seven Tales of Edgar Allan Poe, I had a vision, and the vision was this. It was, yeah, speaking of concert halls, this one has not heard my music yet. I pictured the Royal Albert Hall, and I thought, you know, they have this, oh, what's it called? It's called the Night of the Proms or something like that, once a year, where they pack that hall and they will have some concert. And they did one that was memorable to me. It was, I wasn't there, but there's a recording of it, and it's Gina Bachauer playing the Grieg piano concerto. And they packed that hall, and it is a huge hall. And they've packed it with pieces like Rachmaninoff's Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini.
Wow.
And other pieces, you know. And I thought, I want to write a piece for viola and orchestra that would pack the Royal Albert Hall. And someday, after the world premiere, and after some people have played this piece, and maybe someday a student of Paul Neubauer will play the piece, and Paul Neubauer will go, oh, I like this. But my goal was someday Paul Neubauer is going to play Seven Tales of Edgar Allan Poe
Yes.
with one of those great London orchestras in the Royal Albert Hall. And as you know, Seven Tales of Poe was not written originally for Paul Neubauer, but the person I wrote it for, long story, and bless his heart, he's one of my best friends in the world. But in the end, it just wasn't for him. It's like, this isn't the piece I wanted you to write. And so my dear friend, Doug Clyde, who made that strange video that you're all going to watch that video. He made that video, and I made a deal with him after the world premiere, you know, 1 year later, he could make his version of it, an electronic version. And then we had COVID and everything went wrong. And he said, you know, I want to make my video, and there's been no premiere, and I still want to make it. I don't want to wait for this. And he said, can I make my video anyway? And I said, yeah, go ahead. I mean, at this time, no orchestra in the world was even meeting. No orchestra was meeting.
Right.
Nobody was playing any music. And he said, I want you to play the viola part. And I said, oh, there's a concept. So on the recording, I'm playing the viola, and it is my world premiere solo I've never played a viola solo before that recording. And it was recorded in the same basement, in the same house where I had viola lessons from this incredible viola teacher. And his name, by the way, is Dr. David Dalton. You could look him up. He wrote some books with William Primrose. And I am so honored that he came to my house every week and taught me how to play the viola. I mean, I can't say enough about that. But this is kind of a weird miracle story. So Seven Tales of Edgar Allan Poe is hard to play. I mean, I tried to make it easy to play, but I failed. It's not easy. But I was able to cheat a little bit. So what I did is I recorded the whole thing. I played it for 10 hours. The piece is less than an hour long, but I recorded myself playing it for 10 hours. I played every passage until I finally got it right. And I made sure I played it right twice, because you never know. So what you're hearing is me playing it correctly, but I only played it for 10 hours, but I recorded all 10 hours, and then I edited it. I'll be honest. So if I were to play it live in public, I would have to practice very hard, because, you know, to play it in public perfectly, you have to play it more than twice perfectly.
I would bet. And well,
what we did is I sent it to Paul Neubauer. I thought, you know, hey, let's go to the top first. Let's go
Why not?
straight to the top.
Why not?
And I mailed it to him. And I thought, this is way pie in the sky. I mean, we're not going the route I was thinking of. Maybe after 10, 12, 15 years of people playing it, he will have heard of it. I thought, I'm just going to send it to him. And I cannot tell you how honored I am. He contacted Doug Clyde because I silly me, didn't put in the package how to reach me. And he said, I would be delighted to play the world premiere. So what we are looking for, world, we're looking for an orchestra. In Paul Neubauer's words, what we need next is to find an orchestra willing to take it on. And that's I would say that's the purpose of this video. Let's find an orchestra willing to take it on. We've got a great violist ready to play it. And coincidentally, as I said, my favorite viola concerto is Bartók's viola concerto, which Bartók did not finish. It was completed by Bartók's student, but many years later, Bartók's son looked at it and he said, the student of Bartók made some changes that I don't know why he made them. He took a spot that my father, Béla Bartók, wrote, and he just takes this passage right in the middle and changes the octave. And he says, why would he? I mean, he should at least do exactly what my dad wrote. And he contacted Paul Neubauer. So Paul Neubauer and Bartók's son actually created the new edition of the Bartók viola concerto, where they put it back into the condition. Well, they just changed the things that shouldn't have been changed. So he there you go. This man, this wonderful, amazing violist, he is like the Jascha Heifetz of the viola. Seriously, he was picked by Bartók's son to make a better, more correct version of my favorite viola concerto. So I mean, this is really a ridiculous dream come true. If we can get this premiere to happen, he's willing to do it. We need a great orchestra that is willing to do the piece. So
and we also need
my cry. Come on, someone out there.
Someone's got to have an orchestra that they can. The other thing that we want people to do is to make sure that this is playing while you are opening your door for trick-or-treaters on Halloween. That should be the music in the background.
It is the Halloween piece.
It is the Halloween piece.
Absolutely.
It is. And it has been an honor to have the world's greatest living.
Adorable. Well, this is the world's greatest coach here. She talked me into writing the world's greatest piece for viola. She's the one that kept saying, you do it. Do it. Do it.
And you did it.
You can do it. So bless you.
And you did it.
And I don't care what it takes. Whatever orchestra does this, she's going to be there. We will get her there. If we sell the house to buy her ticket.
No, I will be there. I will be there. And we want everybody to be there. We really, really want
everybody come.
This is the piece everyone needs to know. It's right up there with the Nutcracker, but it's for Halloween, and that's
ours. The viola.
Yes.
There are viola players in every orchestra in the world. I wrote this for them. This was for you because we love you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, and we are going to find that orchestra.
We will find them. Thank you so much.
We're all over that.
Okay.
All right.
I guess this is it. Thank you so much. Love you.
And you too.